All right, we're recording, and I am with Shamira Fleming, who I am told I can call Mai, which is excellent for me, so I don't continue to mess up
Okay.
names. And you're a fellow Baltimore author, which makes me super excited to have you on the podcast. I think you might be the first Baltimore author to come on the podcast. Yeah,
Really?
so
You're the first for everything.
seat of honor. We're like 200 episodes in, and you're my first Baltimore author. Yeah. So, talk to us a little bit. You have an amazing podcast that I listen to religiously called The Purple Charm Experience,
Thank
which I
you.
love. Yeah, it's great. It's you give like inspirational thoughts and then talk about the wine you're drinking, which I don't drink a lot of wine, but I
Yeah.
actually really like listening to you talk about it. Uh, which is funny. Um, but I feel like I'm having an experience when you talk about it, which is great.
That's
And then
awesome.
you talk about Prince, which I am a fellow lover of Prince. No way to your level, but I do love some Prince. So yeah, it's a fan, and you talk about your writing journey, and it's
Yeah.
it's awesome. How long have you been going?
With the podcast.
Yeah,
Oh, so I started a podcast in the summer of 2020. Yes.
nice,
Yeah.
good deal.
So I'm really new at this. And I started because when I introduced my second book, Three's a Charm, in the winter of 2020, I had some ladies at my book launch that kept asking me if I had a podcast, and at the time I kept saying no. I don't really, I had gone on a few podcasts,
Yeah.
but I just didn't think that I would be any good at it. I don't. I for honestly, I really don't even like to hear my voice before this.
Oh,
Before
I
I
can't
started doing
listen
I
to my
did.
own. No, yeah, I can't do that.
It's
No,
like,
yeah.
and so, but I had enough people that kept asking me about it that I said, well, let me at least give it a shot and just share my journey with writing. And so that's why I started it.
It's great. I love it. You do a great job. Yeah, I
Thank
started
you.
listening around, I guess about like 12 or 13 episodes ago. So
Oh,
somewhere in season
that's
two. But yeah,
awesome.
it's really good.
Thank you.
Um, all right, so talk to me about where you are in your writing journey right now.
So, I'm my fourth. I'm working on my fourth book.
Okay.
I
In a
start
in a series?
Yes, and I it's called the Purple Charm series.
Hey,
um,
beautiful branding. Nice
Thank
job.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And it's so funny. Quick little story. Uh, I got the name Purple Charm because when Prince died, I wanted to do something to honor him, and so I created a line dance back then in 2016 that's called the Purple Charm, called Purple Charm.
Nice. That's
So
nice.
and so when I wrote my first book, the first book is a tribute to him in a sense because the love the characters in the story, um the male and female characters in the story are kind of like images of him. How, over the years we would talk about how he had this androgynous side
Yeah,
and then his masculine side. So I use that to play off of that for the two characters. And
that's
so
really
they
cool.
are like images of him. And so
Nice.
that's kind of how I came up with the Purple Charm is Purple Charm, and I just kept it going from there.
I love it.
Yeah.
I think that kind of branding is really smart. It's
Yeah.
nice. Um, so the books are a series. How are they connected? Are they the same characters following through or?
No, so I wanted to, I didn't, I wanted them to be standalone books so that if you didn't read the first
Mhm.
book, you won't be lost if you pick up the third or the second or third book. Now I'm
Mhm.
working on the fourth.
Yeah.
But how they're connected, the first two characters is interesting because, okay, I'll start with Violet and Nate in the first book.
Okay.
But when you get to the second book, the love interest in the second book is the sister to
Nice.
the brother of the sister, the girl in the second book, in the first
Gotcha.
book.
Yeah.
So, and then the third book, um, the love interest is the brother of the girl in the second book. And
Okay.
so I kind of, and you'll see like scenes from the first book in the second book.
Nice.
Like there's a Martha's Vineyard scene in the first book that connects, and you actually zoom in the second.
Oh, that's fun. That's
Yeah.
exciting. Yeah.
And so, and then in the third book, I just keep, playing with the different scenes
Yeah.
and connecting people that way.
Very
But
cool.
people are either friends or they're family members or they're connected in that kind of way to each
Okay.
other.
And what level of romance are we talking? Is this like hot and steamy, or is this like closed door? You don't see anything? Like, where are we on the spectrum?
I would say I wouldn't call it erotica, but
Okay.
it is hot
But
and
it is
steamy.
steamy. Okay.
And it does get a little explicit at times.
Gotcha. Do you head hop in the books? Like, do you have different points of view, or just this one point of view through the whole book?
No, because the first book was like my first time getting my feet wet with
Sure,
it. Yeah. I feel like that one was a little rough. I was a little rough around the edges with the point of view.
All of our first books are rough around the edges. Yeah. Yeah.
When I go back
Did you
and read
publish it
now,
as a paperback?
huh?
Did you publish it as a paperback?
Yes.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I want to pull that first book down, and Amazon is like, nope, it's a paperback. It's up forever. Yeah.
When I go back and I read it, I'm just like, oh, what was I thinking?
What was I doing? Yeah.
It's almost like, because I remember I had a friend that said, I feel like it's you talking, but I don't know. And I was like, oh my God, that's not what I was going for.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually put in my Amazon description on my first book, don't read this, go read this book instead. I was like, don't read this book, go read the next one. I was like, don't read this. I rewrote it as this, go read that. Don't read this. Yeah. So,
but I will say, I feel like each time, each book, I feel like I've gotten a lot better. So second, the second book is written from what's the first point of view?
okay.
And
first person POV.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'm trying to do that. What's I always get them mixed up. Wait a minute, it's the voice that it's almost like you're watching in this fourth book. I'm like, I'm watching and I can see it.
Mm-hmm.
I see everything that's happening, and I kind of trying to, but they don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I'm gonna sound smart, but I literally only learned this like 6 months ago. It's called third person close.
Yes.
Because you can like, the narrator like knows their thoughts. Yes. And like knows how they're feeling, but it's in third person. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's it.
And I sound smart, but I literally learned that like
I meant to look it up. I always have to go back and look and make sure, okay, which one?
Yeah. And you know how I learned it? The person editing my book was like, this is third person close, but you need to be a little bit like, you need a little more inner thought. I'm like, what's third person close? No, let me educate you. I was like, okay, thanks. So yeah, now I can pass that on to you too.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
I always have to have my little cheat sheet nearby. Like I said, I'm still like I love writing, but some of the technical mechanics of writing is I forget.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, you're in good company. I do not have an English degree. The only class I ever failed in my life was freshman English in college. I flunked it so hard. And I have a saying around here that is there are no rules. Mm-hmm. Right? Like grammar is about like, hey, this is the expected kind of agreed upon thing that readers are like, but you can break them all you want to. There are no like, they're all just like, just know that when we break them, we make it a little bit harder for the reader. Like the reader has to adjust, but readers adjust fine. Readers care a lot less than other writers do. True. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the piece. You sent me a piece and we're going to go through it. Before we jump into the line by line notes, how do you want the reader to feel? So is this the first chapter you sent me?
Yes, this is this is literally the beginning.
Nice.
Actually, and listen, I have not even. I mean, I started writing, but I have not done any cleanup, any revisions, or
No,
anything.
that's how I like it. I want to see it raw.
True,
Yeah.
rough.
Yep. Give me the rough stuff. That's what I
Yeah.
want. Yeah. Yeah, I always
So
feel bad when people give me like, oh, I've hired an editor to work on this, and then I'm like, I don't want to give you notes now. You paid for it. I want to talk to you about it.
right.
Yeah, so give me your rough draft. That's what I want.
Yeah.
So how do you want in this scene? You've got a war vet coming home from war,
Yeah.
and he's on a bus, and he gets real excited. Like we learn that he's excited about seeing this woman, Phyllis,
Yes.
that he's been writing letters back and forth with.
Yes.
And he gets at the end of the scene, he gets off the bus and we meet his family.
Yes.
And there's an old man on the bus as well. So
Yeah.
let's talk emotional tone of the opening.
Okay.
How do you want the reader to feel when they read this? How do you want them to feel about the main character? And how do you want them to feel about this moment where he's on this bus?
I I really want the reader to connect with him in a way that understands that that is, I don't know. I guess I want them to feel, I'm not sure if I want them to feel warm yet, because I want them to connect in a way that they appreciate what he just went through. You know,
Okay.
he's been at war, and they are appreciating him coming back, and they are um
So you want them to kind of connect with him,
yeah, I
but
want
not in
them.
like a war way. Like you don't want us like getting
No,
into the
not in a
gritty,
war way, not
but
in
like
a
I've
war
been
way.
gone from home and I'm coming back.
Yeah, like I miss you, and like I understand he's been missing this person, and this longing, and this, that
Gotcha.
anticipation of coming back, and
What's
not.
going to be the climax? What's going to be the conflict when he gets back, when he actually meets her? What are they going to have to overcome in order to get together?
Well, they're not gonna overcome anything. She's gonna break up with him.
Wait, she's going to what?
She's gonna break up with him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So this isn't the girl that he's going to like connect
No.
with in the book. Okay.
No.
Who's the girl he's going to connect with? So we're going to see them break up. We're going to see
Yeah.
him like heartbroken.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you meet Sapphire. Sapphire is who
Nice
he
name.
ends up. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. So we're going to meet Sapphire.
Yeah.
Okay. I gotcha. So let me talk to you about, there's a couple things I want to talk to you about. One of the things I want to talk to you about first is the structure of your piece.
Okay.
This is things that, so before I get there, actually, things that you have going really well. Your descriptions are fantastic, right? Like I feel like I can see where we are, right? I've got it. You've got a really strong character defined. He's got a strong backstory. You've got a strong personality in him. You're hitting a lot of beats that really give me that like warmth toward him, right? Like his family's all there to see him. That's a big like beat coming back. He's got this like longing to see her, right? Like that's a strong like, so we've got a lot of really strong beats to play with.
Okay.
With him. You also I like how you recall things in the past in order to like they're not flashbacks, they're more like flash thought backs to like
memories.
Yeah, you've got good memories going that like bring in the context.
Okay.
So you've got great like things to work with.
Okay.
The biggest problem I see with the piece right up front is that readers skim prose. So if we talk about prose versus dialogue, like dialogue are characters interacting, right? Like two characters interacting with each other, even if it's nonverbal, right? Like if he's like, looking at the old man next to him sleeping, and then that reminds him of something, and then we see the old man like wrestle, and then that reminds it, and then we see the old man like move around. He's interacting with that old man. That still counts as like partial dialogue, right?
Okay.
It's the interaction between characters that we want,
Okay.
because what
Okay.
that interaction does is it brings us into the moment,
Okay.
right? Like it brings us deeply into the moment. So um yeah, and if you don't worry about it, I'm going to send you a copy of this, so don't worry about
Oh,
it.
okay.
Yeah. So I
Sorry,
mean,
I'm a note taker.
you can if you want to. I'm a note taker as
I'm a
well, but
note taker.
I
I'm
also don't
like
want you to.
it's like being in class.
Yeah, I know I'm about to rattle off a ton of crap, so I'm like, I would hate for you to be like have to take it all down. So, but anyway, so like if you think about so I just went to New York City with my daughter,
Mhm.
and she was at a basketball thing, and I dropped her off, and then I got to like walk around the streets of New York a little bit, and there's people everywhere, and there's noises, and there's like the smells of New York, which like with a couple steps you smell like you're like in poop, and then like a couple
Yeah.
more steps and you're like, oh, where's that bakery? Like, so there's just like, but you can like feel all of the life.
Sensory.
Yeah, that's what dialogue, the interaction between characters, feels like for a reader. it
Okay.
it ignites their imagination. They feel like they're in the scene, they're walking in the streets of New York, they're like loving being present in the moment, right?
Okay.
And so prose, which you are using a lot of, right? Like, so we go almost 5 pages before I get what I would qualify as
Dialogue.
real dialogue, right? Like
Okay.
here we have
Yeah.
our first conversation with the old man.
Yeah.
So especially in your opening chapter, we want to grab the reader and we want them to feel like alive in the moment.
Right.
So with all of this prose, part of what you're doing here is the prose is great for like big reflective moments, right? Like, so or even small reflective moments, but like driving into New York City, we came over a bridge in New Jersey, and we looked to the right, and you could see all of Manhattan, the whole skyline of Manhattan.
Mhm.
And we're far away from it, so you can take it all in. It's awe-inspiring, right? Like you've got this like, oh, look at that, like that's incredible. That's what
Okay.
prose does. Prose separates us from the moment, and we take the whole thing in. So
Good.
when you look at like great writers, like writers that we love, um you want to get like 80% dialogue, 70% dialogue in your book, and like 20-30% prose,
Okay.
especially in your opening chapters,
Okay.
because you just want to hone in. A way to like shortcut that, because you said you did this in an earlier book, so a way to like cheat is to put it in first person, because first person feels like a dialogue with the reader,
Hmm.
so you can get more prose in first person, because it feels like the whole thing is being talked about by the reader.
Yeah.
But in this third person, you've got to get like, we need to be in this scene.
Okay.
So if I were to restructure your piece, I would start on the bus in a conversation with an old man.
Okay.
And what I would do here is I would go through these first 5 pages, and I just make notes about like, what are the details I absolutely need to get out so that my reader understands my character, and then get them in, get that world building into that conversation with that old man, right?
Okay.
Because how he have you ever heard of the phrase "save the cat"? That book, it's a book about plotting, like
Mm-mm.
how it's actually how to plot a screenplay. There's one called Save the Cat reads a novel, but I keep meaning to read it. I haven't read it yet. I hear it's fantastic. But the image of Save the Cat is your first scene sets up how we feel about your character. So famous, the book reference is a reference to an old Al Pacino movie where we want the director wanted the viewer to feel really great about Al Pacino. So the movie starts with Al Pacino climbing up a tree to save a cat, right? Like, and that's that moment, even though the cat and the tree have nothing to do with the rest of the story, setting up that moment lets us like, here's how we need to feel about this character moving forward. That's
Mm.
that you've got all of the bones here to give us that moment
Okay.
with your lead character. um so like I would put him next to the old man, and I would start off with like, him looking out the window, thinking about home, right? Like having this moment where he's like reflecting about life and coming back and change. Like your first two paragraphs are pretty strong, but then let me get to my actual notes. Somewhere around like right here, I would have the old man like
Say
ask
something.
him, yeah, the old man on the bus leaned next to him and said like, coming back home, or like, thank you
Mhm.
for your service, or like one of those things that we say to people that are in the military, right? Like, and
Right.
then you can have a moment where he's like, where'd you serve? And he can explain like, oh, I've been overseas. Like, I'm coming home. How long's it been since you were home? This
Yeah.
is, my first time. I bet you got a girl you're coming home to. You're a good looking
Yeah.
guy. I bet you got a girl you're coming home to. Well, I got somebody. Yeah. You
Hmm.
got somebody. You got a girl, right? Like she's probably going to be waiting for you at the bus stop, right? Like it start to set up that
Like that.
anticipation. But you've already got this old man here
Hmm.
in the bus next to him. So let's like use him strategically to
Yeah.
get this scene so that we feel more like we're walking in the streets of New York than we're looking at Manhattan.
Right.
Because
Okay.
we want to be in the streets, right? Like we want to feel the energy of the city around us. We want to feel what is it like to sit on that bus, right? Like because your reader, especially a romance readers, on top of all other readers, they're showing up for an emotional journey,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Like, and the emotions aren't felt in the big reflective moments. The reflective moments are about like pausing after you felt an emotion. The
Right.
emotions happen in the scene. And then we pull back with prose to go like, whoo, wasn't that great?
Hmm.
And then
Hmm.
we go back into a scene. So what we want to do here is take these paragraphs, figure out what's really important that needs to stay, and get it into that conversation with the old man. Does that make
Got
sense?
you.
How does
Yes.
that feel?
That it makes a lot of sense, and it um I think I can do that. I can definitely
Okay,
do that. Yeah.
great. Um, I'm gonna shoot you a video when we're done. That we use in our Patreon. You're a
Uh,
Baltimore author though, so I'm just gonna give you things. That we talk about writing a dialogue centric scene where
okay.
we write the scene as only dialogue, and then we come back and fill in all the extra.
I heard you say that before on SPF. You said it.
Yeah,
Yes.
I talked about it with the SPF crew. But yeah, it's an exercise we use to
Okay.
force you to think about moments like this as scenes and not reflections.
Okay.
Right? Like we want a scene. And another trick I use is I tell people like imagine this story is a stage play. And like what your stage play starts off with right now is it's a black room, there's a black curtain, and there's just a narrator's voice reading to us like the world that we're in. And that's not what we show up for stage plays for. Like we'll be
Right.
there for like a couple minutes and we'll be like, what is happening? Or if you're like thinking about it as like a movie in your mind, right?
Right.
Like if the title credit comes up, you're like, oh yeah. And then for like 5 minutes, we get the scene of a bus. We're looking down at the bus and we're just like hearing this voiceover of like somebody like we'll tolerate that for like 3 seconds, but
Yeah.
then we're like, put me in the bus. Like, what are you doing? So that's the reader feels the same way. The reader's like, I want to get in the bus. I want to get in the scene. I want to feel the scene. I want to like
It
see how
makes
this,
sense.
yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, as you started walking through the notes, I I'm thinking, I'm like, what you know what, that dang, that does make sense. I can see that.
Yeah.
I see where my shortcomings are,
I
where
wouldn't call it a shortcoming. Like you've got good stuff in this chapter. Like, look, I read the chapter and I was engaged the whole way through. I don't want you to think like, oh, this is bad. Like this is good. But when we're talking about like, hey, can we pull the reader in closer?
yeah.
Like, let's get them as close as we can.
Okay.
Because they're reading at night before they go to bed.
Yeah.
It's by their bedside table, right? Like, or they're like catching an hour on a lunch break. right? Like reading,
Mhm.
and we want to keep them as engrossed and engaged as possible.
And I pride myself on being able to do that. I've had people tell me that they just love the way the way I write, and so I really want to take what you're telling me and make it better.
Yeah, and it's
Right.
super like I'm telling you, like you're great at prose. Like you've got really solid descriptions, like I was saying up front. You've
Mhm.
got a good reflective theme, like something you're doing really great that I don't want you to lose is you've got a really strong opening theme that you then keep coming back to all the way to the end of the chapter of this idea of like coming home. What does
Yeah.
it mean to come home? What's changed? What hasn't changed? Right? Like you're setting up a really good thematic conflict where from the first paragraph I read and I was like, okay, I know what this chapter is about. But then you
Mhm.
never took me into the scene. If you take me into the scene, I think it's just going to take it to that next
I
level.
I
Yeah.
think so too. And now that you say it that way, I'm just like, okay, now because I'm like, I want to go fix it. I want to go fix it.
Well, wait, I got a couple more things to say. Don't quit on me yet. Um,
I'm on.
okay. First line, first two lines. A man's vision for his life is with soul, and through his faith, he walks with the confidence of his souls. Great play on words there. Fantastic. No matter where you go in the world and no matter where life leads you, there's always a road that leads home. Both of these are amazing opening sentences. You only need one. We only need
Would
one.
that second one be a good one to close the chapter with? You
Yeah,
think?
that'd be a great one to close the chapter with. Yeah, I might bump it down to the bottom. But you
Okay.
don't need, but it felt like a restart to me. Like you
Yeah.
got a really strong first sentence.
Yeah.
It was like,
And
oh,
then I came back
we got a
thinking with
second
it
one after.
again.
Yeah. It's like, oh, okay. We got two of them.
Like,
Yeah.
wham bam, here you go. Here it comes again.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, she wants to get this theme across. We're gonna get this theme. Yeah. So, but no, it's great.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and so here, um, what was
You
I
said
saying
to
here?
give you an example. And I got that. Okay. Because I was like, okay,
Yeah.
now I got
Okay.
to figure that requires for me to have to go back and really think about, okay, what has he done in his young life
Yeah.
that would
Yeah.
be a
And
good example for
yeah.
that?
And so you've got this like moment of like something he's learned in the past. Remember where home is.
Yeah.
What this note is me telling you, like, hey, give me an example instead of telling me the philosophy, give me an example.
Yeah.
What that is me trying to get you into a scene. I'm like, get me into a scene as quick as you can, like get these words in somebody's mouth. And
Okay.
this is a cheat you can use, right? Like if you've got a paragraph like this of prose that's really well written, but is this kind of like reflective, unidentified thing, attribute it to somebody, right? Like before he
Okay.
was a soldier in the war fighting, he always believed, and that's what he was always told, right? He can
Mhm.
still hear his grandfather's voice saying that time that blah 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 and blah 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 blah. But just, and I don't need to see the scene, right? Like I don't need his response to his
Yeah.
grandfather because you're in this reflective prose moment, but it makes that prose more personable.
Got
Like,
you.
oh, this is coming from this person, which
Got you.
yeah. Um yeah, so I'd try to get that moment because it's a really nice, like you set up the theme in this paragraph really well. But if you
Hmm.
can put it in somebody's mouth and keep it as even keeping it as a memory, it just makes it that we have a deeper like emotional connection to it.
Got you.
Yeah. Um, oh, I want another sentence here.
Okay.
That was 2 years ago, but something in him changed. The war physically and mentally robbed him of something he felt so strongly back then. Give me some kind of like metaphor here. Again, I'm trying to get you like into the emotional heart of it.
Okay.
So just give me one more sentence there to like live in that moment for a second. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Hmm.
We create these emotional beats for the reader, and this is a strong emotional beat you have here for the reader. You're like, hey, reader, feel this thing with him. But it
Yeah.
takes the reader twice as long to feel something as you think it does. Right.
Yeah.
So, like, you got to give them an extra sentence when you want them to feel something. Because
Okay.
otherwise they're gonna blow by it, especially if it's in prose. They're gonna they're gonna like go straight through it. You got to give them, because they don't imagine prose, they take prose in, right? Like the thing that makes dialogue so engaging, that makes that exchange between people so engaging, is that they're imagining those people talking. They're seeing it in their mind as they read it. This is when they read prose, it's like reading nonfiction. You're not visualizing it in your mind, you're just like absorbing it. So another trick, in addition to putting prose in somebody's mouth, if you have a big emotional beat you want me to feel in prose, you got to live in it a little bit longer to
Okay.
make, because I'm not going to feel it otherwise. I'm just going to blow past it. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Mm-hmm.
This is a really great break. You cut up here, you're talking about you know, how he's changed, and then down here you start talking about his high school sweetheart. Give me that paragraph break there,
Okay.
because that, what that paragraph break does is it makes me take a mental breath.
Okay.
So when I hit that paragraph break, I kind of go, you know, like it's like you ever do a lot of singing?
A little bit.
A little bit. You ever play a wind instrument?
Who?
Like trumpet or like trombone?
No.
Okay.
No. But he does.
Nice. So whenever you do one of those things that like takes prolonged breath, you have to do like a catch breath. So like I used to play trombone. You know, you'd be
Oh.
playing trombone and then you'd have to like real quick before you can start blowing again.
Mm-hmm.
That's what a paragraph break is. It's that catch breath that like makes you just pause for a second and then go back in.
Go back
It,
in.
when you're having like topical changes, that paragraph, that catch breath will really emphasize them for the reader, because they'll have
Okay.
to take that like mental and then go into the next one. Does that make sense?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, if you put this in a scene, you can ignore this note.
Okay.
If you don't put this in a scene at this point, I really need to get like deeper into the conflict.
Okay.
Right. Like, but if you go to a scene, I don't need it yet. Does that make sense?
Which part? The part about that part
Yeah.
about her?
So like right about here at the bottom of your first
Oh, okay.
page, I'm starting to ask myself, I'm like, what's the inciting incident? Like, where am I going? What's the
Yeah.
inciting incident here? If you get me if you get him talking to the old man and you tell me where, because this whole first page, it is just like a voice in a black stage. Like, I don't know where he is. I don't, it's not like, it's good. It's a good thematic philosophical start, but I don't know a lot about my surroundings yet. And then at this paragraph here, as he said on the old Greyhound bus, traveling home to Fort Bragg, traveling home from Fort Bragg, this is where the lights come on. And I'm like, oh, we're on a bus.
Okay.
We're coming home
I
from
see
Fort
what you're
Bragg.
saying now. I
So
see what you're saying.
before I got here, I was like, hey, I need some conflict. I need some context. This is the moment where I need it.
Yeah.
But
And it's too long before it gets to that point where you get on the bus too.
yeah, if you keep this first paragraph, you take this section and put it in somebody's voice.
Yeah.
You keep this paragraph here because it's really strong. And then right here, you get me as he's driving home from the Greyhound bus. And then the old man next to him says something. And then the rest of these details get into that old man and his conversation. I'm soaring, right? Like I am in, you've got me like connected, and I'm sticking through the whole, I'll stick through to the very end with no like pauses, because I want to see it roll. Does that make sense?
Yes.
We don't need to talk about that one. We've already talked about that one. Yeah, no, we already talked about that one. We don't need to talk about that one. Yeah, we don't need to talk about that one. Yeah, so your themes here are gonna land a lot stronger when they're coming out of his mouth.
Okay.
So like here, I don't, and the reason I'm saying that is because I don't want you to lose. You start summarizing here for me the conversation that I actually want to see, right? Like he and MJ made small talk earlier on the journey. That's it. That's what I want. I want to see the small talk, right? Like, before he passed out, he told MJ what it was like traveling to the north. he was a performer as well. He lived in Harlem for some time in the Renaissance. I want to hear that coming out of his mouth. I don't want you to lose this theme that you've got going here
Mhm.
of like traveling and leaving home and what it means to come back. So when you build that scene with the old man, make sure that you let him tell some of this story.
Got it.
That you let him like connect to that theme, like, oh, I used to be on buses like this all the time.
Yeah.
Right, like
Yeah.
going from
And running
Harlem
the
to the
Chitlin
north.
Circuit. Like
Yeah.
that's kind of what I wanted him to be able to talk about, like
Mm-hmm.
the Chitlin Circuit, because I'm setting up for the next books, the next
Nice.
book, which is going to go back into the 20s to the Harlem Renaissance, and so
Oh, perfect.
um,
Then we have to see this conversation.
yeah,
If this
yeah,
guy's going to reappear, or if this, we
yeah,
got to see this. Like we got to connect to him.
yeah.
The question you're going to have is, how does MJ feel about this old man talking to him?
I, I think when as the when he starts to smell his breath and all that stuff, I think he's gonna want. I think the feeling is gonna be, "Can you please stop talking?"
Yeah. So, and that's the reason I ask is because you got to be careful, because this
Okay.
is your save the cat moment.
Okay.
MJ has to be heroic,
Okay. Yeah, he has to
especially in a
remain.
romance. He's got to be a dream.
Yeah, he has to remain nice.
He's got to stay nice, even when the old man's breath is bad.
He
You
was
got to.
polite. He
He's
was
polite.
polite.
He's polite. But as you expand this conversation, it's going to be tempting because
Yeah.
MJ's head is like on Phyllis and on getting home, and he's tired of
Yeah.
traveling. As you build it out, it's going to be tempting for MJ to be like, I wish this old man would stop talking to me. It's going to be tempting for MJ to be like looking out the window, trying to wrap up the conversation. But if you do that, we're going to dislike MJ.
No, because I know how to build him. I know how to make him to be the nice guy.
Okay.
He's gonna be that guy. He's gonna be the compassionate guy, even though he might feel like you need to be quiet because your breath is
Yeah.
killing me right now.
Yep.
And but he's a nice guy, and he's as you go through the rest of the story, you see that he's the kind of guy that um that wouldn't hurt anyone.
Perfect. Yeah. And that's what we want. You may want him to do. You
Start
may want.
showing some of those features.
Yeah, start showing some of those features, and you may want to give him like some way to serve this old man, some
Okay.
way to do something nice for this old man. Like maybe the conversation starts because the old man is trying to get something out of a bag over his head on the bus, and
Okay.
MJ gets up and does that for him, right? Like
Yeah.
that would be a like save the cat moment of like, oh, look at him taking care of this old guy,
Yeah.
even though he doesn't want to get up, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, um,
Okay.
yeah.
That'll work.
You may want MJ to look across the aisle to the woman sitting across the aisle and be like, "Excuse me, ma'am, do you have a stick of gum?" And then like get two of them, one for
One for
him,
him
and then
and
ask
one
the old
for
man,
yeah.
"Would you like one too?" Right? Like
Yeah.
just in that like respectful, but then have the old man point it out and be like, "I see what you did there." Right? Like so that kind of like, does that make sense? But like we want
Yeah.
to make sure that when you build this opening scene, you don't make him too um what I think our natural instinct is, which is like frustrated that like I just want
Mhm.
to get home and get off this bus with you stinky breath, man.
Mhm.
I don't want to be sitting next
Mhm.
to you. Yeah. Um
Mhm.
okay, any questions about that before we get into like descriptions?
No, I think it's good because it just, I mean, you just turn a bunch of lights on for me.
Awesome. You might have two scenes here. It depends how long you want him talking to the old man. If you
Okay.
have a scene where he like where the old man goes to sleep and then wakes up and they talk again, that's actually two scenes.
Okay.
So think about it like a movie or like a TV show. If the camera turns off and turns back on, you're in a second scene.
Mm.
So I would recommend that you keep it all in one conversation. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
don't have to have everything in the conversation. So as you're writing, think about what details, like I said earlier, what details are really important to you that get across, those need to come out of their mouths. But you have a lot of details in here that I can promise like aren't going to be important. Like,
Okay.
he spoke with a Southern accent, but had big dreams and ideas of war. His love of his girlfriend, he wanted to be there for his sons, for his soon to be baby. He wanted to move them back up north. He wanted to be, you may keep this all in a reflection, right? Like, so don't feel like you got to take all of this and make it into one conversation. Have like a chunk of conversation. And then as the topic starts to change, give us a paragraph of reflection where you start summarizing the unimportant details and then come back into the conversation for the important stuff. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And it'll
Mm-hmm.
give you a good rhythm there of like, oh, they're talking and now I'm summarizing, and now they're talking and now I'm going to summarize a little bit. He's going to think about Phyllis. He's going to reflect on Phyllis. Now we're talking again, right? And now now I'm going to reflect on like coming home. Yeah. This is a really nice detail, right? Like your descriptions of people are great. Mr. Williams' gray tweed newsboard cap was nearly falling off his head from the time the man would accidentally wake himself up when he choked slightly on his own saliva. MJ found it quite comical and chuckled a bit, silently trying not to wake him. MJ's stealth skills keeping silent was on point, making one sound in the combat zone was difference between life and death. So he has morning breath here. He wakes up. It's this funny scene. Something I want to have you do to take these descriptions kind of like to that next level, right? Because this is a great description, but just kind of amping it up a little bit is tell me why the newsboy, the old man's kind of vulnerability here, how
Mm-hmm.
does that make MJ feel? To be sitting next to an old man who's like asleep, he's got this cap falling off of his head and he's snoring, and like MJ, we hear that like MJ is great at being quiet. But
Mm-hmm.
how does this moment make MJ feel? Because MJ's our vehicle, right? Like we are traveling through the emotional journey with MJ. So we want to feel what MJ's feeling. So use this moment to teach us a little bit about how MJ feels about things. Does that make sense? Does it
Mm-hmm.
remind him of his own grandfather? Does it remind him of some kind of other vulnerability? Does vulnerability make him uncomfortable? Does he want to wake the old man up because he's nervous about, the old man being embarrassed about the hat falling off of his head?
Mm-hmm.
Does he think it's sweet? And does he hope that like the old man has somebody to take care of him when he gets home, right? Like you can see like all of those reflections from MJ tell us, give us a different picture of who he is. And like
Okay.
if you can take this moment and moments like this to reflect on how MJ feels about his cap falling off and his mouth hanging open and his like,
Mm-hmm.
take that great descriptive moment you have.
Oh, I could take it. It could be like, it reminded him of the the old man that sit in church for dozing off during
Yeah,
a sermon. Oh, yeah, because
perfect.
oh, okay,
Yeah, but then tell me how he feels about it, right? It reminded me
how
of
he
the old
feels.
man dozing off during church, and it gave him a sense of home again.
Home made
Yeah,
him feel home.
made him feel at
Reminded him
home.
of home.
Yeah, reminded him that like it's not it's sleeping, sometimes the community has to let people sleep because that's what they need to
Hmm.
do, right? Like, and
Right.
then if you want to make it a bigger paragraph, be like he can remember talking to his preacher and his preacher saying, if they come to take a nap or if they come to listen to this sermon, whatever they need, I'm going to give them, right?
Yeah.
Like, and now you've got this like really engaging paragraph that teaches us about who MJ is, that gives us like the voice of somebody in his life, and that shows
Hmm.
us how he feels about it, as opposed to just like giving us this really great description. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
A
So
lot.
start thinking about like, how do I strategically use these moments to really build out MJ's character? Like
Okay.
I think one of the hardest things for me as a writer is that like, especially since I'm a pretty heavy plotter, like I have spreadsheets upon spreadsheets for books. Um, I I really want readers to marvel at my great plotting devices. Look at my inciting incident. Look at how I'm recalling this thing in the plot.
Hmm.
Watch me, but they don't care. What they care about is like, oh,
How did it
I
make you
care.
feel?
Yeah, how do I make them feel? And like living in MJ's shoes. Can they live through MJ's shoes and be? And I find that like more and more books where I'm like, I'll be reading them and I'm like, I don't even know what the plot of this is, but I am
Mhm.
here for this character, right? Like
Yeah.
I will finish this for this couple. Like that, or like I can see the plot coming like a million miles away. I'll be like, okay, I know exactly where this is going. Especially your romance readers who read
Mhm.
like 1,000 romance novels a year, right? Like,
It's funny because I don't read a lot of romance novels. I just like to write them.
yeah, no, that's fine. Whatever works. But like, but you got those whale readers who are like pounding through
Yes.
romance books. They're not in it for the plot. They know the plot points better than you do, right? Like
Mhm.
they're in it for the emotional pull of these two characters coming together.
Right.
And so like the more of these little details you can give us about MJ and his life and what's going on in his head as he's experiencing this stuff, the better, which is why I was saying earlier, like first person point of view ends up being a kind of a cheat to this, because in that first person POV, you can do a lot of that like expounding.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm listening to an audiobook right now um called The Dutch House,
Mhm.
and it's read by Tom Hanks. And
Ooh.
everything that man says is charming. Every every damn thing he says. He can be talking about like the wind outside. I'm like, yes, talk about that more. But it's read by him, and it is a lot of description. It's a lot of like, but it's first person, and because it's
Mhm.
first person, it does that like cheat thing where it's like, oh man, you're just piling on summary after summary after summary, but
Mhm.
because you're giving it to me in a character voice, and I feel like that voice is talking to me, you can get away with it. So if you're going to keep this third person close, you got to
Yeah.
start using those other cheat techniques to keep it like tight.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
I really laughed at this. This was really funny. Nice. Um, yeah, and I don't think I started cutting some details down here because you're kind of circling. I don't think you
Okay.
need them. Like this, like MJ was right. They did stop. And thank goodness they were able to grab a quick bite, brush teeth, and make a
Yeah.
quick call. Like this is all stuff that like, oh, I can see as the author, you're imagining the chapter and you're imagining the scene. You're like, well, this is what actually happened.
Mhm.
Um, this is a good like place. This would be a good like couple sentences to break conversations.
Okay.
Like if you wanted to break a conversation, like, as the old man said, blah, 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 blah. And as he did, the bus started to pull over. It was time to get off. They got off, they brushed
Gotcha.
their teeth, they did that. But then when we get back on, we got to get back into a conversation, right? Like, or you can have a
Right.
good, in just a few short hours, like you can pick back up here,
Mhm.
um, and like, but that's a good, like, as a standalone sorry, let me say it that way. In a group of pros, this detail, it feels like too much.
Too much.
If you're using it as a transition out of a conversation into this prose here, it feels strong. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. As a general
Okay.
rule of thumb, this is like I have no rules. There are no rules, but as like a general guideline, 3 to 5 paragraphs of prose and then get somebody talking.
Okay.
Yeah. If you got more than 5 paragraphs of prose, you,
It's too
you
much.
got to get those prose so engaging, because that's when readers start to go like, oh,
What
how
are you
much more is
doing?
this? Yeah. How much more until I get to the action? When are they going to start like making out? Right. Like, so you got to get through that. Like,
Mhm.
yeah. Um, this was all good. I'm just cutting small details here. I don't think we need to
Yeah.
talk about it. Oh, so here, this is fun. This is me like I'm in it now. Like
Mhm.
so this is me being nitpicky, but um, you give me this description of his sister. Again, your descriptions are great. Like he turned in the direction of shouting. It was a familiar voice, a precious and outspoken kid dressed in a trendy denim jacket and matching bell bottoms and a red blouse beneath. And she had to be about 11 or 12. The girl that was calling out to MJ, it was his little sister, Jasmine.
I should have
Cute.
had her caught yelling. Well, I thought.
I
So
know.
she.
I love the calling. I think it's great. I love the calling out. The age here is out of place.
Oh, okay.
By giving me her age before you tell me that that it's his
This is
sister, I'm like, I don't care. Like, how much of this do I need to know? Like, there's a 12-year-old girl yelling at him. Like, so just tell me this last line and drop it up here,
okay.
right? Let me know who's talking. And this is a general, like, rule for dialogue when you introduce in the stage of your imagination, right? Like the stage of your thinking of your scene as a stage play. When somebody new comes on, let me know who they are within a sentence or two.
Okay.
Unless the mystery is the point. Here, the mystery isn't the point, right? Like he knows who she
Right. You're
is.
supposed to know who she is.
Yeah, if he doesn't, then we've got another plot point we have to deal with.
Right.
Like
I
he
just got to
hasn't
introduce
moved.
them to you,
Yeah, you
the
got to tell
reader.
me who she is, right? Like, so this is a great opening sentence. It's fantastic, like great visual. It tells me that she's trendy. She's in bell bottoms. It's interesting to me that MJ's noticing all these details, right? Like, it's nice. And then you tell me like it was his little sister Janet, and the cute button nose with dimples and a wild smile and a smile as white as the ocean. She had to be about 11 or 12, right? Like, so that you this line is what I'm missing. I'm like, I need to know
Yeah.
who this is. Yeah. Again, that's me like micro editing, but flipping that gets me as the lessens the
It changes
burden.
the whole feel of that paragraph too.
Yeah. And it lessens the burden on me as a reader. I'm like,
Right.
okay, I see it now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, this is another one of those places you've got this great descriptive moment where you want me, I can tell you want me to feel something, right? Like, hey son, come here, let me take a look at you. Good
And I wanted him
gracious.
to have that connection with his dad, like,
Yeah,
oh, dad, get out.
it's great.
Get here.
Yeah. His dad said as he gathered him into his arms with tears in his eyes. Beautiful moment. Although MJ had been on a Greyhound for hours, his uniform was still fresh and crisp. That's where I'm like, I don't need that detail. He
Yeah.
looked at me as if he had gotten dressed. I'm so glad. As he looked as if he'd just gotten dressed. I'm so glad that you're home, son. So if we're gonna play the game, like one of these things is not like the other, right? Like super emotional moment here,
Yeah.
super
But
emotional
then
moment here,
out
but
of
then
place.
here you're talking to me about how he looks.
Yeah, he's
And
out of
I
place.
don't need to know how MJ looks. I want to know what it feels like to have been at war and to get
Yeah.
off of a bus and be hugged by your dad.
Yeah.
That's what these two sentences are. That's what
Yeah.
I need here. Right? Like um dad gathered him up with tears in his eyes. MJ fell into his father's arms as if he was a 5-year old who had just skinned his knee, releasing
Mhm.
all of the pain and emotion that he brought with him from war
Yeah.
into his dad's embrace. Right? Like that's what I want. That's the
I
moment that
feel
I'm like,
that.
oh
Yeah.
yes, like give me that. So, you know, and this is the like when they make your book into a movie, this is the like, you
Yeah.
know, Denzel playing the dad gives him his
Mm-hmm.
like choke it up a little bit, and then you know you see the son just like oh like you know Michael B. Jordan just like grabbing in there, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
this is the moment you want there. So like just live in it and eat it up and let me know how MJ feels to
Okay.
be held by his dad, right?
Okay.
Now the trick is you can't tell me how he feels by being like MJ loved the hug.
Yeah.
You can't do that. Which I'm not worried about you with that because you're really good at like putting those kind of emotions into body language and prose, like just like you did with the father, right? Like gathered him up in his arms with tears in his eyes. I just need that kind of like response from MJ too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's yeah. Otherwise, it's great. And you'll notice when you get in here to your dialogue, I'm leaving very little notes because your dialogue is really strong. So, like, I'm not having to cut your dialogue up at all. That's part of the reason why I'm like, hey, at the top, give me a scene because
Yeah.
you're writing scenes really well. So I want
Thank
more
you.
scenes. Yeah. Um, yeah, yeah. Again, like here, I want the emotional response. So as you write
Mm-hmm.
dialogue, think about these moments as like ways the exchange between characters, that like dialogue that you're passing back and forth. There's three things being exchanged. This is true in real life and in writing, but there's three things being exchanged. Expectations, right?
Mm-hmm.
MJ's getting off the bus and he expects A. His family is waiting at the bus and they expect something too. Do those expectations match or clash? That's the first thing that's happening in dialogue. Like we're both expecting something. Here, the expectations match. So you get this beautiful hug, this embrace, this stuff. If MJ was getting off the bus and like his father was like expecting him, you know, to get off the bus and like suddenly be like servile and be like, oh, dad, it's so great that you're here. And MJ's like, I don't want my dad here. I want my mom here. Or like then we've got a clashing scene because expectations clash, right? Like, but here expectations mesh. So, but that's the first thing being communicated in dialogue is our expectations of what's happening. The second thing being communicated is our perception of the world, right? Like, are things how we see them, or is there contrast in how your character sees them? So your character's getting off the bus, is this what he expected to see, right? Like, so there's the expectations of the people, and then there's like the expectations of the moment, of like what we're going to see in the moment. The third thing is the emotion, right? Like when we talk to people, we are a mess of like body language and the words we use and all that kind of stuff is communicating our emotion. And so like this line here, now I can tell you that, oh, now I can tell you that it's a surprise. His dad chuckled as the trio ushered the young man into the car. The family's 1975 green Ford Granada was shiny blue and new. MJ was excited to see it. You talked to me about him being excited to see the car, but not about how he feels about this reunion with his family, right? Like, which unintentionally communicates to me something about MJ, which I don't think you mean to communicate, that he loves the car more than he
More than he loves
does.
his family.
Yeah, because if you can imagine him getting off the bus, having this conversation like, who's at the house? Oh, it's a big surprise who's at the house. And MJ's like, you brought the car, right? Like, so I need him focused more on the
On who's at the
surprise
house
than on the car, right? Like, otherwise you're communicating to me something about MJ's obsession with the car. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, but in all of these conversations, as you're like writing them, make sure you're closing that emotional loop.
Okay.
Because once you close the emotional loop, right, like it's a surprise. Man, MJ hoped beyond all hopes that the surprise was Phyllis.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
His dad chuckled as the trio ushered the young man to the car. Now I can have this moment about the car. It's not that I can't have it, is that you got to wrap up the emotional moment about the
From the
surprise
first part. Yeah.
before you get me to the car. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we see this in the dialogue. So you have this line here. His dad took very why is this even open? His dad took very good his dad took very good care of car and automobiles because it was so meticulous and adamant about them running for a long time. You tell me up here that this car is like, he's got a car that's super old, that like it's shiny and brand new, but like his old car lasted forever. So I don't need this line because you told me in your description's so solid.
Okay.
Trust your descriptions, right? Like you've got really strong ones. So yeah, trust them. This is a new scene. If you want to keep this last paragraph, Frank, Pops Mitchell was jovial and compassionate man. MJ admired his tall and incredibly handsome, magnificent smile, gleaming white teeth. His father always tried to help everyone. You've got this great description about who his father is. At Christmas time, he dressed up as Santa Claus. Put it in a scene.
Okay.
Right? Like, have them talking, put them in the car, talking on the way home.
Back. Yeah.
How was, his dad asked, how was your trip? Right? MJ notices that he didn't ask how was the war. Right?
Yeah.
He looked over at his father. He remembered that he's, saw the gleaming white teeth. Even in his old age, he's still incredibly handsome. Have the father say, like, did you get enough to eat? Did they stop and feed you on the way? And then have somebody in the back seat, like, you look too skinny. And he could be like, no, I
see where you're going. I see. Yeah.
You see how I'm like, I'm building
that whole thing can be expanded out into more dialogue and set in that scene.
Yeah, and you can tell me who the father is in that scene, right? Like, MJ looked over at his dad and remembered how he used to donate all the kids at Christmas time, right? Like, have his dad say something like, we were worried about you. Yeah. And then use that to have MJ have a reflection about his father worrying about people. And then you can get this note in here to me, but I feel present in the moment and I'm like living the moment with MJ. Okay. Those are all the notes I had for you. Anything else you want to talk about?
I feel like I now I want to go right. Now I want to go fix this stuff.
Good.
I'm like, what?
It's great.
I'm like, well, you need to read the rest and tell me how the
Yeah, careful giving me things to read. I'm very slow. So
That's
people have
okay.
been like, hey, will you read this 10,000 words for me? And I'm like, 3 months later, I'm like, hey, I read it. And they're like, yeah, I wrote like
Okay.
another 60,000. Like this not
That's okay. It didn't
yeah.
take me about that long to write the next part of the book,
It's
the
funny.
next chapter.
Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, you've got a great piece. It's an exciting start.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. This has been very helpful. Like I
Good.
need this is the kind of feedback that I need.
Good.
And that will help me grow. Like I really want to grow as a writer and do better, get better at this. And
Yeah.
this is exactly the kind of feedback I've been wanting to have. I just don't I don't have enough friends that
No, I totally get it. Yeah.
that can
When I
give me this detailed kind of feedback that is
yeah,
constructive, but also inspires me and motivates me to to go sit down and
get it done.
rework what
Yeah.
I have.
Yeah, when I first started writing, I don't think I've ever told this story before. Started writing my first book and I felt extremely alone. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Mhm.
And so like, cause I didn't know any writers, like I didn't know any,
Yeah.
I knew a guy in Atlanta who had helped me learn how to write short stories and who was a friend, but he was in Atlanta and like, he couldn't meet with me once a week. Like he had his own
Mhm.
life, he had
Mhm.
his own kids. Like he couldn't like, hey, let's get on a
Yeah.
call once a week and like talk through what you're writing. Plus this was like I just had my 7-year anniversary publishing. So this would have been 9 years ago when I was first trying to write. So
Wow.
yeah, I went on Google and I looked up every literary agent in Baltimore and I just started
Wow.
emailing them. I was like, hey, can I just like, I need to
Feedback.
understand. I would love to learn from you. Can I just like, and they one after another, they were all like, yeah, we don't do that. We don't want to sit with you. And you just, as a writer, you just feel so alone. You're like, I need
Mhm.
help and I don't know how to do this. And I talk to other writers. They'd be like, well, you need to go like get your master's in English. I'm like, I got 5 kids.
There he is.
I
Who
got a
got
full-time
time for
job.
that?
I'm not getting my master's in English. What are you talking about?
I got
Yeah.
time for that.
Yeah. So part of the reason I do this is because
Yeah.
like I get that feeling of being alone and being like, oh, like I don't know what to do next. I don't know if this is any good. I don't know what I'm doing
Yes.
wrong. You're like, I don't like I know something's wrong, but I don't know what's wrong.
I
Yeah.
don't know. Yeah, and like to be quite honest, you know, like I said at the beginning, a lot of times I just sit down and I'll write
Hmm.
just because I'm writing what I'm feeling and
Yeah.
what I would like to read. And then I'll go on Writer's Digest or go Google,
Yeah.
something that
Yep.
to make sure that I'm writing in a correct point of view, or
Yep.
if I feel fuzzy about something, maybe I might need to look this up. I'll go read, or I'll go, read an article, or I'll go find a podcast
Yep.
episode
Yeah.
and try to get some help that way.
Yeah.
My editors have been really good with, just giving me the initial feedback and let me know, hey, your purple prose is a little heavy
Yeah.
over here. I've had that. My
Yep.
first editor would tell me that she put it in her critique of my first book, my first and second book, and so I try to be mindful of it, but I always slip back into it, I think, from
Yeah.
time to time. So,
We all
but
have
this
our habits. The key is to turn those habits into strengths and to be
right,
like, oh yeah, look at when I do this thing, you're gonna love it.
right.
Oh yeah. And I think it doesn't, the good news is it doesn't have to be lonely. Like there's enough of us in the indie author world supporting each
I'm
other.
happy to connect with you. Like, this is awesome.
Yeah, no,
So
I love it. And hey, I'm here for Baltimore authors. So write the car scene and send it to me.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And let's talk
I'm
about
a,
that one too.
okay. That'll be awesome.
I can't take a whole book because I'm too slow.
No, no,
But
I won't do that to you. I
give
won't
me
do
a
it to you.
give me a scene. If you get stuck on a scene, just email it to me and be like, hey, what's
Okay.
this do? And yeah, we can read through it. Yeah,
Okay,
because
that'll be
we got to get
awesome.
our Baltimore authors out there. We got to get more of us. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
all right, I'm gonna stop the recording. We can talk a little bit more.
Okay.